This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We've talked about the U.S. budget problem. I've written about it. Insider Iowa has covered it quite a bit. And as you know, at the very last minute, last week, the President and Congress reached a temporary agreement on continuing spending, and now the U.S. once again faces the prospect of some real serious crisis over the budget. One of them is raising the debt ceiling, which would allow the federal government to borrow money to continue operating. Without approval by Congress and the President's signature, the debt ceiling cannot be raised. Without that, the federal government has to shut down. If it does, it also means that the United States essentially, at least for a while, becomes insolvent, cannot meet its financial obligations, and that would create, according to economists, an enormous crisis in the financial markets. The United States is still the richest country in the world, and for the U.S. to not be able to meet its obligations in terms of bonds and repayments and so on would shake the world economy and be very bad for the American credit rating. So this is a real serious problem. Beyond that, we still need a budget. We need an actual budget for this year and the beginning of a discussion about budgets for the following fiscal year. There is a crisis because the Republicans really want to cut a very large amount off of the budget in order to bring it back to a manageable size. It's much, much larger than anything that's ever been done. President Obama gave a speech this week in which he has some ideas about restructuring Medicare, Medicaid, and so on somewhat, but the Republicans really want to eliminate some of those programs and basically privatize them, turn them into privately financed with some government support. And this is a very difficult confrontation between Democrats who believe in the validity of Medicare, Medicaid, and a continuation of Social Security at its current, at least more or less its current operation. The Republicans want to give the states the power to decide how they manage their Medicaid funds, which is medical care for the poor, and how this is going to be resolved is a real puzzle because they are very far apart. There is very little common ground. My own suggestion has been we might want to look at something like we have done with another enormously political and difficult problem, which is base closings. Base closings basically involves identifying military facilities, military bases that are unnecessary or redundant, and closing them down, decommissioning them. Because of local pressure and jobs lost and so on, we have had a terrible time doing that. The only time we were able to do it is when we created a base closing commission, which was non-political and apart from Congress and the executive branch. They looked at all the military bases and they made recommendations for base closings. The Congress had the option of voting yes or no, and they couldn't amend them. They couldn't say, well, we want to go in there and change some of these things. And because it was taken out of the hands of the politicians, it was successful, and we managed to close a lot of redundant, obsolete military bases and save a lot of money. I'm wondering if an independent budget commission wouldn't work, in which you appoint a nonpartisan group of smart and well-informed individuals who would take a look at the budget and look at issues and make a recommendation to Congress that also would be essentially a reform of Medicare and Medicaid, perhaps, that would be an up or down vote. I know that President Obama had a bipartisan commission that recommended some things that should be done, but the commission basically had no other authority, and so those recommendations have not been implemented in policy. But maybe we need some discipline that comes outside of the political process if the politicians can't do it. Yes, I know, and I know what you're saying right now. You're saying, but the budget is the most important political act that Congress and the President take every year, every fiscal year. And I understand that. But if we are going to head for continuous derailment of the process and, train wrecks on the budget. Maybe we need a different process to take it out of the political arena and make it a little easier for politicians to implement smart, financially responsible, and yet socially acceptable policies. This is Steffen Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.